Today, I'm going to talk about something that many English learners wonder, and this is how to start thinking in English. Hey there, I'm Daniela. Welcome to my channel. Some of my students ask me, Daniela, if you speak 3 languages, what language do you think in? Before getting into the steps that will help you to start thinking in English, let me tell you a little bit about how I started thinking and speaking in my first foreign language, which was Polish. I left my native country, Bulgaria, when I was 22 years old. At the time, I only spoke Bulgarian. When I went to Poland, I wasn't too worried because I knew some Russian and I thought this would help me to communicate in Polish. Boy, was I wrong. But after a few weeks in Poland, I realized that I'd started understanding quite a bit. I think this happened because I spent a lot of time watching TV and repeating what I'd heard. Now they call this imitation or shadowing, but back in the days I didn't know these methods. I just did it because I noticed that I remembered whole phrases and sentences better than individual words. Also, when I was saying whole sentences, I figured that I was already using correct grammar. And I also realized that Polish people use different intonation from the intonation I was used to. So by repeating exactly what I heard and how I heard it, I felt I was developing a new identity. I kind of felt like an actress and I liked it. Fast forward 3 months, and people couldn't believe how much I had learned. When I came to the US, I did the same thing. I didn't speak English, so I started listening and imitating again. I also started taking ESL classes later on. So when people ask me what language I think in, my answer is that I don't think in one particular language. I believe I think in concepts and ideas. Thinking is such an abstract action that I believe that even monolinguals don't construct full sentences in their brains. What I suppose people aim for when they want to achieve fluency in another language is the ability to verbalize their abstract thoughts using English. Or in other words, voicing their thoughts straight into English without the help of their native language. And if they're not able to do it, they feel frustrated. But while voicing thoughts in English eventually becomes inevitable for more advanced learners, people who haven't learned enough vocabulary and grammar are simply not ready to start doing it. So let's get into it. Here are the 7 steps you can take to eventually be able to voice your thoughts in English without translating from your native language. Step number 1 is to learn enough vocabulary. I often hear people who start learning English as adults complain that they don't think in English. But how can you render everything you think about into English if you only know a few words? This is impossible. So at this stage, focus on learning and acquiring more vocabulary. The difference between learning and acquisition is that learning is more conscious, while acquiring a language is more subconscious. That's why people who live in an English-speaking country acquire words and concepts more easily by being fully immersed in the language. But if you don't live in an English-speaking country, don't worry. With the technology we have today, you can definitely acquire many aspects of the language, even if you live in your native country. For example, you can watch YouTube videos on a topic that you're passionate about in English, or you can read articles and books in English. I know this is very difficult when you know only a few words, so you will probably have to look up more words in the beginning. But don't just try to memorize single words because you will forget them faster and you might not fully understand how and in what situations to use them. Memorizing a whole phrase will make it easier for you to use it smoothly and without much thinking when the situation is appropriate. Not only will you sound more fluent, but you won't feel the need to translate to your native language. The phrase is already there, ready for you to use it. Step number 2, learn some basic grammar. When we think, we imagine concepts and not just single words. And to create a concept or a picture of something in our minds, we need to connect words and grammatical phrases and sentences. So in order to be able to think of something in English, you will need to know some grammar. Knowing grammar will also help you think faster because your brain will start putting nouns, verbs, adjectives, adverbs, etc. into separate groups, making it easier for you to mix and match depending on what you want to say. But don't worry too much about correctness because this will prevent you from communicating and might cause you to forget what you wanted to say. Okay, step number 3, have sufficient amount of comprehensible input. According to the famous linguist Stephen Krashen and his input hypothesis, learners improve when they receive second language input that is one step beyond their current level. He calls this I+1. This means that if you're at a certain level, you will need to consume content that is only a little harder for you. This way, you will still be challenged, but not to the point where you don't understand anything and you get frustrated. In other words, the content you consume shouldn't be too difficult or too easy because otherwise you can be either lost or bored. You can watch a TED Talk on a topic that you're already familiar with, watch a movie that is not too hard to understand, or participate in a speaking club with other English learners. For example, you can join my speaking club and become a part of a beautiful international community. I'll leave the link to it right in the description below. Step number 4 is to talk to yourself. Okay, this might sound funny, but when I was a child in my native Bulgaria, I was told that only crazy people talk to themselves. I don't know how this belief came to be, but it made me question my own sanity many times. But when I was learning English, I constantly talked to myself out loud, and I found it super helpful. First, I wasn't embarrassed because the only person who could hear me was me, which allowed me to let go and not to hold back. Second, I tried to anticipate what another person might ask me, and I had a phrase in different versions ready to go. To be honest, some people were surprised by how quickly I was becoming fluent. Of course, I never told them that I talked to myself, but I'm sharing my secret with you. So, my advice to you is to repeat out loud whatever new words and phrases you hear. Eventually, you will start building your own sentences. By the way, let me know in the comments if you ever talk to yourself when you try to learn something. Step number 5, start feeling what you're saying. Every language has its own intonation, and it's important to know how to use it in order to be correctly understood. Knowing vocabulary and grammar is important, but definitely not enough when it comes to sounding natural and appropriate. To acquire English intonation, listen to podcasts, watch TED Talks, but above all, watch movies. Podcasts and speeches are great, but in movies, you see more natural conversations between people in different situations. Then put yourself in the character's shoes and repeat, and repeat. Try to do it with the same tone of voice. Your body will start feeling it. Believe me, I've done it. Step number 6 is to read in English. Reading is great because you might notice phrases or grammatical structures you sometimes overlook when listening and speaking. Read anything that you find interesting and try to remember phrases that you can use in your real life. The more you use such phrases, the more natural you will feel when they come out of your mouth. Okay, we're almost done. Step number 7 is to strive for communication, not perfection. Perfectionism usually creates anxiety and prevents you from using the language freely. If you're constantly worried that you will make a mistake and others will judge you, you will never be able to communicate fluently. Create a friendly learning environment for yourself where you don't feel that you will be punished for making mistakes. Speak with other fluent learners or native speakers who will have the patience to help you out and won't judge you or laugh at you. You will see that you'll learn way more when you enjoy it. Okay, so that's all for this video. Let me know in the comments if you enjoyed it and which step you think is the hardest to do. Also, don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already done it. I'll see you in the next video. Bye!